So welcome to another edition of Ask Me Anything, where I attempt to hand the reins over to you all and let go of control without having to have somebody pulling my hair or tying me up to do it. I know we've got some delightful questions in the chat, and I'm going to probably start with those. But please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question in between, because I don't want to only give preference to those that came uber prepared. Although I have to say that works for one of my kinks. I love it when people pre-plan, pre-prepare, and it's totally fine if things happen on the cuff. So I've made sure that the recording is now just of me, but I'm gonna I think I'm just gonna lovingly mute everybody. And if you have a question, just raise your hand and then I'll come and call on you. So I'll go to the first question. I knew this one was coming, Naomi, about the fifth dimension, and I'm trying to remember where I know where I referenced it. It was in another patron-only event. So just as I know where it was. I'm remembering now where it was. Anyway, the fifth dimension is basically, yes, the dream space. So it's where we start kind of with the potency and the inspiration of an idea. It's where we start collecting the energy to coalesce, to start coming through into a thought form. And then, so if we go to fifth dimension, that's where sort of the inspiration or the dream of something happens. I think of it as the dream time. Then into fourth dimension, you come down, and that's when it's not just a dream becomes a thought. And third dimension is where we live, right? It's where our bodies are, the mountains, the sea, the cars, everything we're experiencing as reality. And second dimension then becomes the earth and the parts of the earth that help decompose. So that could be little creatures in the earth, that can be fungus or mushrooms, or we use it a lot in the energy school that I study with my teacher, Norma Ramos-Ott. And second dimension, like, for example, if somebody like sends a lot of energy your way, it could be in terms of emotion, say anger, or I'm thinking of something with a family member now, or if you feel overwhelmed, if you have anxiety or something, you could offer that and send it down into the earth space to be composted. And second dimension is a place where things go to decay or to be disposed of. And then the first dimension is closely aligned with the center of the earth, and it's where void space lives, so pure potential that fuels everything. So I think that's what I feel confident saying about the fifth dimension. So think of it as the space, the dimension where we go to dream things into being. I don't understand so there's a question here. I got invited by one of my patrons to join a daily chanting group that chants something called the Hanuman Chalisa. And it's a 40-verse, Chalisa means 40, and it's 40-verse prayer speaking to the powers and the strengths of Hanumanji. Hanuman is the monkey god. And I'm not entirely sure what's being asked here, but while I wake up and get dressed or walk, not concentrating, and I'm assuming this means, I'll look for a visual affirmation of this, that you're not necessarily concentrating on what you're doing during the practice. Is that what you mean, or what? I'm not quite sure.
So, I mean, have the concept to be respectful when I pray. And that means mindful, that means pay attention, that means take a bath beforehand and dress nicely. In reality, this event is at 7 a.m. and I struggle with sleep. And so when I wake up in time for it, I roll out of bed, turn it on, and then go about my, personal duties while I listen. So I'm thinking more prayer is better than none. Some is better than none. And so I'm listening. But I'm not doing all the other respectful things. What do you think of that? How do I reconcile? I want to be respectful, but I want to attend even when I'm sleepy, and it is the time I need to make my tea and get dressed.
So I think it depends on the prayer that's being invoked. And I was at a workshop recently on the Bajrang Bang, and there they very specifically said, if you're going to chant the Bajrang Bang, you have to come showered, dressed, ready. To clear your mind, you have to be showered and dressed. They very specifically said for the Hanuman Chalisa, you do not have to specifically be bathed and dressed. So I know when I was in India the last time for the Durga Puja, we were required to be showered before we came. Our bodies had to be cleaned. Then if you used the restroom at any time, and the pujas were long, we were sometimes there for 5 hours or something, so you would use the restroom. You had to wash yourself all over again. You didn't have to get naked, but you had to use they have hoses in India. And you had to use that to clean yourself again because of the potency of the kinds of classical tantric pujas that we were doing. So I think for regular practice, say like chanting the Hanuman Chalisa, I also tend to roll out of bed. And I agree with you, we want to have our practice integrated into our everyday life. And in India, you'll actually watch people and they'll go and they spend the first 2 hours of their day in the more religious cities like Varanasi praying. But part of that is the body purification, and they're going into the Ganges and they are literally taking their bath. I don't know how clean you get in the Ganges, especially in the middle of Varanasi. But anyway, so just sharing that, I think it's going to depend on which lineage you're following and which prayer or which form of worship you're invoking. So I know the times that if I were going out to a puja event, I would probably bathe. But singing to Hanuman, it's like, yes, you're invoking the deity when you chant the Hanuman Chalisa, but it's a more casual practice. This is the way it was described by Tara Mata in the workshop. So she said for that, it's totally fine to be like a regular householder. But if you're going to use the arrow or she actually called it the mace of the Bajrang Bang, then Siddhi had told her you have to. She's like, Siddhi literally made her share what her morning routine was. And she said, oh, well, I get up and I put my clothes on, and then maybe I take some breakfast, and then I come down and I practice, and then, later on in the day, I might bathe. And she said, no. If you really want to use the potency of this prayer, Bajrang Bang, you have to first purify the mind and clean your body in preparation to clean your mind. So I think it depends. I've only been told, or I've only heard it specified in those two. I'm not saying those are the only two, but those are the only two times I've been aware of where I was told you have to wash, at the Durga Puja and then for Bajrang Bang. It's an interesting thing because I won't name her because this may end up being public, but there's a particular woman, I'll describe her a little. She's got longer sort of sideburns and shorter hair. And I notice when she chants, she is so immersed and so focused. And I love it. I can feel that attention to the practice. And ideally, there is, ideally to make it bhakti yoga. Yoga is this union of the mind and the spirit. You're trying to keep, and even Krishnadas says this, you are keeping your mind as focused as possible on the mantra itself. And whenever you notice it's not paying attention, you bring it back. And the whole practice is about bringing it back. There's a wonderful recording of Madhavadas, who is one of the elders in ISKCON. He's a kirtanwala, so a person who leads kirtan, call and response chanting. And he's quite high up in ISKCON. I've only had the pleasure of being able to chant with him in person once. But there's I'll have to look it up for you, but there's a YouTube video where he talks about this practice, and I actually reference it often when I lead kirtan, where he talks about the mind being chanchal, which means it jumps around like a monkey, right? And in India, that's very appropriate because there are monkeys everywhere. In fact, when I was in Vrindavan, they warned me, you can't wear your glasses on the rickshaws because the monkeys will come and steal your glasses. So we're trying to tame the mind. And the more focus you can bring to the practice, like, for example, the reason Krishnadas really, in my opinion, is so popular, it's not because he's the best singer in the world or the best harmonium player, but he has such a deep connection with Neem Karoli Baba that transmission is so potent. And that's because he spent the last 40 or 50 years training his mind to just focus on Maharaji. And we get the benefits of that practice when we chant along with him. So I think encouraging yourself to be as present as possible is wonderful and highly recommended. And it's totally fine to be washing the dishes or taking a shower or whatever while you are chanting things like the Hanuman Chalisa. I'm a big believer on being able to include meditation in our daily lives. So I chant a lot when I'm driving or whatever, but I wouldn't chant hardcore tantric mantras while I was driving because I might have a car accident, right? So my attention is going to be partially on the road and partially on the mantra. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. And
okay,
and confirms how wonderful the Hanuman Chalisa is as a everyday. It's powerful and beautiful and versatile practice.
Yes. So there's something also though about creating sometimes, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes of that hour-long practice where you're just focusing. So for the rest of the time you could run around, but to create that discipline and that training of the brain, because that's really, this is what that Kirtanwala Madhavadas says. He's like, we're about to do something really serious. And his description of it is quite lovely. He's like, you have to concentrate on every syllable, and all they're chanting is the Maha Mantra. So it's Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. They chant this one mantra for 90 minutes. And you can absolutely feel the entire focus of every breath and every syllable for him is totally immersed in that mantra, and that then becomes yoga. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to jump some, if that's okay. What's the question about Baba Haridas? I don't understand the question.
Well, it just, what do you think of him.
Oh,
Sometimes you have told us about certain um, gurus to avoid,
oh.
etc. So the two questions in a row, or
The
maybe three
second
questions in
Lama
a
that
row,
you're
are about
mentioning,
that.
I don't have any familiarity with, so I can't comment at all. Baba Hari Das, I'm aware of two, and one is linked to the Hanuman temple in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know that much about him. I haven't been to that temple. I know of people that were there. My understanding is the program is quite rigorous, or at least used to be when it was an ashram. I don't know if it might still be an ashram. I heard whisperings of a scandal, but I couldn't even share the details. I'm just answering as honestly as I can, from somebody that I met at a Bhakti Yoga festival once. And I believe that created a split in the community, but that is not a lineage that I'm super familiar with. There is, however, a Kirtanwala called Baba Hari Das, and he sings the most, he's Indian or was Indian when he still had a body. He does the most ecstatic kirtans ever, and him I would highly recommend. So, and then I don't know what this
Caroline,
specific,
I do want
yeah,
to say,
please.
I have a good friend who actually started introducing me to the Hanuman Chalisa class, and she kind of grew up on Baba Haridas's lap, and I finally went to meet her and her father. So, see, it's in the family, obviously, at the Mount Madonna Center, and we went up to the temple, and it felt really, really good there. Felt really
Great.
good and kind, well done. Yeah, so personally, it felt good there.
Great. I know some wonderful people that have been connected to that ashram. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. And I just, the Lama, I haven't heard of, so I don't feel like I can speak. I don't know what your question is about ISKCON Bangalore.
It's a YouTube channel that was recommended.
Okay, by that friend that you mentioned in the chat.
Yeah, and so, but I haven't checked it out. Um, but I thought that ISKCON itself was not, was
Yeah,
something.
so I go to, ISKCON stands for the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, and it was created by Prabhupada, who is their guru, who is no longer in his body. But he came from, I believe it was Kolkata, I think it was Bengal, and he came to America. And in many ways, people believe that he is the person who brought Bhakti Yoga, at least the Vaishnavas and ISKCON devotees believe he is the one that brought Kirtan, call and response chanting, and the practice of Bhakti Yoga, of which Kirtan is just one part, to the West. And ISKCON believes quite a lot in I can never say this word, proselytizing, trying to convert people, right? And many people have seen the Hare Krishnas chanting, they're doing Harinam, Sankirtan, where they're on the streets and they're playing the harmonium. And I'm doing this with my hands because they play the kartals, right? The hand cymbals. Some of the most ecstatic kirtans I already referenced in ISKCON Kirtan from Chowpatty, which I will post. I'll post it for you on the Patreon, probably when I post this video. And that is an ISKCON Kirtan. It's ISKCON in Chowpatty. And Chowpatty is a place in India, and Bangalore is a big city in India. So I'm not familiar with that particular channel, but I will say some of the most beautiful and most ecstatic kirtans that I have experienced have been ISKCON kirtans. So I go because they love Krishna as much as they do. And I have friends that grew up in ISKCON, and I don't know if you want me to go into it or not, but ISKCON also has its own significantly problematic history with child abuse and things. So my personal recommendation would be go for the bhajans, go for, like I go sometimes to an ISKCON temple on the festival days, but I would be very mindful about how involved you get. And I'd be very vigilant if you ever took children to the temple. And there are many ISKCON devotees that would tell you the same thing. So, yes. But I'm not familiar with that channel specifically, but I mean, check it out. There can't be any harm from listening to Kirtan, especially online. I listen to a lot of ISKCON Kirtan because they're very ecstatic, and they'll take with the main mantra in ISKCON. It is said in this time of the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the age that we're living in, and it's basically the dark ages. It's the way the Christians in their own way would refer to the end times, for those of you that may be more familiar with that. And so we're in this dark time, and the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that the only thing that is needed in this Kali Yuga is chanting the Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. So you'll see a lot at ISKCON, they don't only chant that mantra, but they'll like do that for like 3 hours, just one mantra. And that's another whole level of practice. If you just drop into one specific mantra and you're bringing your mind, bringing that attention back, back, back. So that's, I think, what I can say about that. There's a question here about my name evolution, and that could mean a lot of things. So I'd love a little more. Are you talking about the Jewel in the Lotus coaching, to Sarasa Tantra, or what else are you referencing?
Someone let on to me that you might have another name.
Oh.
I don't know. And then that person said, well, you'd have to ask her. So here I am, and it asked me anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, great. I will answer it. But I am going to answer it a little circumspectly. So I live by the name. My son calls me Caroline. My bank has the name Caroline. And Caroline Carrington is the name that I live in the world. And I made the decision, well, we've been focusing a lot on spirituality. There are questions coming up about kink, which I'm delighted about too. But I decided that I wasn't going to work under a pseudonym, that I wanted to, as part of modeling that it was okay to be who you are in the world, fully expressed. I wanted to work and live under the same name, but I was given a different name at birth, which I'm not going to share on the video. And I'll tell you how it first came about. It was during my divorce. I remember going to a level 5 high workshop, and it's all about control and surrender. And I decided, I actually went, normally I did most of my workshops in California, my high workshops, but I went to Massachusetts. Is that right? No, I beg your pardon. I went to Michigan. And I decided that weekend, I'd always loved the name Caroline. And I always said, if I had a little girl, I would call her Caroline. And the name Caroline means little song of joy. So I loved that as the mantra over my life. And I tried it out for a weekend. I was at an experimental workshop, and I asked everybody to call me Caroline that weekend. And I loved it so much that I kept playing with it after the weekend. And at that time, I had a very dear friend who was like a mother figure in my life, whose name was Carol. And Carol means song of joy, and Caroline is little song of joy. So that tied in nicely to that dynamic. And as I was getting divorced, Carrington was my married name. My maiden name is something different. But as part of my own healing journey, I had quite a, what's the right way to frame this? Quite a challenging household that I grew up in, is a polite way to say it. And I felt very disconnected from my birth name and from the last name that I'd been given by my dad. So I kept my married name, which was Carrington. It's also my son's last name, so that made the most sense. But at this stage, I was also estranged from my mum. And that was a conscious choice on my side. My mother was a particularly abusive and manipulative person. So it felt like a reclaiming of this new chapter of my life. And I didn't do it lightly. I talked about it for a long time in therapy before I officially decided to, change it on all the channels and start living as Caroline. But I've loved it. And I sort of claim it as, I think of it as my spiritual name and as the mantra over my life, because I can be awfully serious, but I'm doing better and better with bringing more joy into my world. So I thought someone said to me once, your name is the mantra that gets spoken over your life. So I liked Little Song of Joy as the mantra spoken over my life. That's the edgiest question that's been asked so far today, Naomi. I'm going to share this video with patrons only, I think. Anyway, okay. So then there's a question here. So I'm not sure what you want to know about DS and devotion and sexual healing and power as a submissive. Do you want to give me a little more about that so that I can know what you want to know?
I don't remember, but I wonder what power as sub-name means.
Oh, my sense is, because I remember when some of this came up, you and I were talking about it, believe it or not, I think after an evening of chanting. But I was inviting you to really make sure that even as a submissive, that you negotiate from the position of being equal partners before you go into power exchange when things shift, right? The power dynamic shifts. And I was specifically saying that it's really important not to give your power away and not to lose your voice as a submissive. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll explain it through the lens of one of my kinks. So one of my kinks, for example, is to be pleasing, right? But that can get quite complicated. So I'll share a very personal story. I was doing a 4-hour scene with a pretty heavy hitter at the Citadel in San Francisco years ago. And while it's now not that difficult for me to come on command, at the time I hadn't been trained to do so. And in front of a whole room of people, as part of objectification, as part of this long scene, and we'd easily been playing for 2 hours already, he said, I want you to come for me. And I'm not saying this is right. Do not do what I did. But I was caught in this like desire to be pleasing for my dominant that evening. And this, like my body didn't know how to be able to come on command. Ooh, sorry, my yoni's talking to me as we're getting nice little contractions in my yoni as we're having this conversation. That normally means she approves, always getting excited about what we're talking about. But afterwards, when we were doing the aftercare and decompressing after the scene, I said, that put me in a complicated position because one of my kinks is to be pleasing, and I really wanted to please you, and I knew you wanted me to come, so I faked it. This is definitely not going live on my regular YouTube channel. This I'm just going to keep for the patrons. Anyway, this is tying in perfectly to giving over your power, because I'm like, feel like I'm offering my wrists to be tied by you all today. Anyway, but he said to me afterwards, he said, oh, well, thank you so much for telling me, but I'm really sorry. He said, I just wanted to see, like, if it worked. He didn't have a huge attachment to it. So now I've learned to explain that kink when I'm negotiating, because I take my submission very, very seriously. And he was just like, it wasn't a big deal to him. It was just, but he didn't like that I'd faked it, obviously. And I just, in the moment, I didn't know how to handle that, because I didn't know what to do with the command, and now I was in a submissive space. So it was a great teaching experience for me to learn how to say, you know, just be mindful that I really like to please, and I want to, part of what I like to play out in kink is a healing of some of my childhood trauma, where I was, where I felt like there was an expectation on me always to be perfect. And so in a kink scene, I'm going to pick up my little kitty Carly, because she's come to say hi. Say hi to everybody. She'll probably get feisty soon. Anyway, I get to play out a scenario, co-create a scenario where I can be perfect, right? It's one of the things I enjoy about kink, because I was never able to be as perfect as I felt like was required of me in my childhood. But I can do that now as an adult, right? And I can be pleasing. So I think that's where some of that, this is getting awfully intimate today. I think that's where some of that kink comes from. But I was told quite early on about, you know, we can become so good at trying to be good submissives and trying to please the dominant or the master or whatever, that we can lose ourselves. And I think if we're having a healthy, DS relationship of any kind, really the dominant or master and the submissive are in service to each other. So it becomes like this feedback loop. I'm loving seeing the nodding and agreement and the thumbs up. Yeah. But that you're really serving each other. And ideally, even when the Dharm or master is giving instructions or assignments or asking for something, he's doing it to uplift the submissive or to make them the best that they can be, whether that's a cultivation or just, you know, I have a friend in the scene who she struggled with an eating disorder. And so one of her rules from her master was she wasn't allowed to eat in her car, because that's what she did. It didn't count for her if she ate in her car. So her dominant would like get her to check in with him every night and tell him, you know, how much she had walked or how much she had worked out at the gym and what she'd eaten that day. And part of their rules in their DS was that she would not eat in the car. So that was a way where he was supporting her empowerment and her healing. And they were doing it through the lens of an MS relationship, a master-slave relationship. So that I've actually been asked in the past before by some doms, like, what are the things, you can do this when you're negotiating as equals, what are the things that you want to improve in yourself? And you can have your master or your dom help you with that, right? And you can be rewarded when you do well. If you like being spanked, for example, you can get spanked. And if you don't like being spanked or caned or whatever, that could happen if you don't fulfill the requirements. Yeah. So I hope that at least somewhat answers the question. Okay. I love it that you came so prepared. So I'm not familiar with this quote, I'm the guru of the whole world.
I think I heard that maybe Maharaji said that. And I wondered what it may mean.
Yeah, so the way I'll answer it in a different way. He may have said that, I just don't know for sure, and I don't want to misquote him, but he said, God, guru, and self are all one and the same. So you hear sub-ek. So, and then he's also said, like, the guru is looking at you through your own eyes, right? And that everybody you meet in life is also your guru. So with the commandment to love everyone, which is easy when we're blissed out on wonderful energy at a kirtan, then it's easy to look at people through the eyes of love and be, or easier. But it's harder. For example, Ram Dass had a picture of Trump on his altar, and that was part of his practice, because he's like, I need to love, I know that's a tough one. I need to love everyone. And for example, my mother-in-law, not to make this too political, but she has, let's just say, very different political views compared to me. You can infer on that what you like. But she's a great example. She's a wonderful grandmother. She's almost always been very kind to me. So she's an example of being a guru, and we're using this quite liberally, but where she's like, oh, just because people are different and hold different political views than you, she's still a lovely person. I just happen to disagree with her politics. So I notice in many ways, KD does this as well. At his kirtans, he's showing up just to love people. Even I notice sometimes he teaches with people that have been involved in some kind of scandal. And the way I've made my peace with that is to go, okay, he's loving everyone. So I haven't heard the quote that I'm the guru of the whole world, but Ram Dass says, there's a lovely piece, which I'll try and include on here as well. There's a guy called East Forest who has beautiful music. He creates sound journeys for psychedelic experiences, but you can listen to them whether you do psychedelics or not. And he's got an album that he made with Ram Dass. He went to Maui while Ram Dass was still in his body, and he recorded. He just let him speak. And in one of these, he says, if you don't have a guru, I'll lend you mine. And I just like the easefulness of that, because I think a lot of us in the West struggle with this idea of guru. We don't really understand what it is. We're not living in India. Like, how do you know who's true, who's fake? But I like the way Ram Dass phrased that. Like, if you don't have a guru, I'll lend you mine. Right? So that's Maharaji having a heart as wide as the world and welcoming everybody in. Yeah, so I think that's what I'll say. What I will say about that. Any other questions for me? This is amazing. You came so well prepared. Oh yes, I'm seeing a hand. Do you want to unmute yourself, Hunk?
Okay, this has been a fascinating thing. Uh, I don't know if Delight has, or Naomi has told you about how much he's told me about me, how much he has said about me. But certainly one of the descriptions she gives me, which I accept as a compliment and a loving compliment, is that sometimes I'm stubborn. I'm also coming from a scientific background, so a lot of my work is, if A is there and B is there, then C must come, things of that sort. But years ago, I read a couple of books from Heinrich Hesse. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he was a German that spent some time over in India and got impressed with the practices there, the religion, and that's kind of my only explanation of how that stuff works.
How which
Uh,
stuff works?
well, Indian philosophy, practices, religious principles, why they do it, and actually, one of the advantages I'm getting out of this is that your explanations of the thing like the chanting practices and things of that sort help me understand a little bit more about why people do that. What do they get out of it? And if it were up to me, I give the example that if I were in a Zen monastery and having to sit on my knees, which is almost impossible to do at this point, and facing a wall with a guy with a big stick that keeps me awake, uh, I would fall asleep within 15 minutes. Or even these chanting practices, I would eventually, get into the idea of why, it'd be almost like I'd have to force myself to do it if I was necessary, like somebody standing there with a gun in my head. But if I'm not getting anything out of it, if I'm personally not getting anything out of it, then why do it? I know Naomi gets a lot out of her chanting and her practices and following and the altar and things of that sort. And I love that she can do that because she's important to me. And the thing is that you know I'm actually kind of happy as to the methods that I use to do my own growth. I feel much better now than I did 15, no, actually 20 years ago, to the point of where, I don't have to be scared all the time anymore. I can be, I'm not 100%. I don't need to be 100%. One of the important things I got out of it. And just enough so I can navigate and have some fun in the world. And I like where I'm at. And being with Naomi has helped me get there, and she's very important to me.
Oh,
And,
I love that you're sharing that here with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, sometimes we have our rough points, but she knows that I care for her, and I know that she cares for me. And yes, we have tiffs sometime, but hey, I'm happy with knowing what I want, and I'm happy that for 85% of the time, I'm in a good space.
Great. Well, I'm with you, the whole Zen idea, and I have friends, some of you may know, and she speaks about this publicly, so I feel comfortable sharing, but my friend Midori, who many of us know.
Oh, yeah.
The kink scene, Midori was raised with Zen. Like, she was a little Japanese girl that would, like, be trying to sit there, like, meditating when she's, like, 4 or 5, and if she didn't sit up straight, she'd get whacked.
Yeah.
Whacked with a big stick. Now, I have to say, I'm not signing up for that kind of meditation. One day, if I feel, I still don't feel like I'm there, I might sign up for Vipassana, which is 10-day silent retreat. But that sounds really edgy to me. I know lots of people that get great amounts of things out of it. What I notice for me is dynamic meditation works the best. And what I mean by that is something where you're doing something. So I like chanting because it gives me something healthy that I can attach to. I'm doing this because I think of the mantra here at my third eye, and I keep my attention on the mantra while I'm chanting, and then as it moves away, I bring my mind back. And at the end of that, at the end of the dynamic, I get to the stillness and the silence, and the mind gets a break. Right? Some people like to follow the breath, or to look at a candle, or to do a walking meditation. I'm quite passionate about people being able to bring mindfulness and ultimately single-pointed focus, and therefore meditation, into as many aspects of their lives as they can. So you can, I haven't been particularly successful at this, but you can turn washing dishes, for example, into a meditation. When I'm giving private sessions to my students, I'm doing a lot of movement and I'm touching the whole body. That for me is meditation. I have 100% of my focus of all my mind, body, and soul on the person whose body I'm touching for 3 hours. right? So that is meditation. It doesn't look like meditation. I'm not being very still. I'm even talking through it. But my whole focus is to be exquisitely present with that delicious being and with every single part of myself, my breath, my nipples, my hands, whatever parts are touching, my feet, whatever parts are touching the person, I only want to do it with intention. And that meditation for me starts an hour before they come. Each rose petal I lay on the bed is part of that meditation because I'm laying it with intention.
Okay.
So I'm very passionate about how can we walk meditation and ceremony out into our world. So I think it can look a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Meditation could be bird watching. You could be sitting there with your binoculars,
Fishing.
noticing how you focus the lens. It's taking me back. I've bird watched since I was a kid, but and watching how you move your breath. Meditation can be, a lot of athletes even speak to this. Some of them even do mindfulness practices where they visualize themselves doing certain routines or like scoring baskets. And they say that that practice is just as good as doing the actual practice of shooting hoops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the science is still catching up with a lot of the mysticism that has been found in the East. And I can't speak for Naomi's motivation, but I'm a big believer in trying something, and I don't mean heroin or crack. I mean like a meditation practice. But okay, try something, because until you've done it, you won't necessarily know how it feels. You might have to try it for an hour versus for 5 minutes to actually see, but the proof is in the pudding.
The one question that I have is that years ago, somebody mentioned that there's a Indian philosophy or religious practice that's based on science. I've been digging into that, and I haven't run across any mention of that, and I still don't know where I'd have to look in order to dig
Yoga is considered a science because it's literally, and even, well, there are many kinds of yoga, but it's considered a science because if you do X plus E plus Y, you're going to get a prescribed result. So if you do the practices the way that they've been prescribed, and often in the West, unfortunately, they haven't been done as they were originally prescribed. But if one is doing that, then it's like an alchemical reaction and you will get the desired result. Okay. So I would Google yoga or the science of yoga and see what comes up.
Okay, I'll check that out.
And you can come back and tell us what you discovered.
Yeah.
Okay.
What did you say again? You about guessing at my motivations for chanting?
Oh, I just said I wasn't going to presume to know what your motivations are for chanting.
I was thinking you could probably guess.
Well, why don't you just share with us instead of me trying to guess?
I just like it so much. I don't understand why, especially the Hanuman Chalisa. And I don't know, it's just, I'm just drawn to it. Yeah. I thought I heard you say it's like crack.
Oh no, I'm
no, that was something
I was saying try things and then you can see what the results are after you've tried, but I'm like, not crack, not heroin.
Oh, got it.
I don't recommend trying those to see what the impact is.
But I have noticed some people, people's reactions when I've tried to share it. Some people say, that was pleasant. That's it. They don't want to come back. They don't, they're not drawn to it. Some people say, well, it's interesting to see people being into that. But not feeling anything. It seemed
Right. Well, it's interesting that I've heard it said that in India, often people don't feel anything, don't notice anything, and they're doing it out of faith. They're doing it out of, this is my culture, this is what I'm supposed to do, and they do it whether they feel anything or not. I think one of the blessings for us Westerners that are getting so involved in the Kirtan world is that we're doing it because we feel different. We actually do feel something, right?
Yeah.
I'm not knocking Indians at all. I was honestly shocked the first time. It was my friend Ekabumi who was sharing. He's like, oh no, most Indians don't expect to feel anything. They're just doing it because that's what they were told to do out of teaching.
Krishna Das tells us to not do it to feel a certain thing. He says, you're not in it for like it's going to feel good. You just practice, and it is what it is.
Right. Well, this is where I like what, this is sort of embellishing on that, what Jayutal, who is also one of my teachers and an Imkroli Baba devotee, says. It's like, you bring everything to the practice. So some days you're angry and you bring your anger. I'm noticing that when we do the 108 days, Naomi, I can literally feel the karma getting burnt off me. I can feel my stuff getting worked out. And I'm talking on a very subtle energetic level. I can feel my stuff coming up because 108 is a lot. Like you're sitting there for hours and hours and hours immersed in the magic, because these mantras are like sacred keys that unlock energetic portals, right? And almost like the image I got on the, I think it was the first day that I was doing that practice, was how Krishna Das often said people would sit in Maharaji's presence and they would blossom like flowers. Their whole faces would change. They would open up to the love. And when we're chanting to Hanuman, Imkroli Baba was said to be the embodiment of Hanuman. So we are invoking Hanuman and invoking Maharaji. He said, whenever you think of me, basically, kind of like Jesus, I will be there. So I literally got this image. It's like we are sitting in Maharaji's presence as we've invoked this practice that he's invited us to do. And we are getting transformed. We are having the parts of us that need to be worked on are coming to the fore. So, it's easy to chant when one is ecstatic and having a blissful experience. It's harder to make yourself sit down and do sadhana or daily practice when your foot hurts or you've had a fight with your partner or you're having a bad day and you're feeling grumpy or whatever. Then it takes a lot more discipline. And where I saw KD just doing this masterfully, it's actually happened now twice when he's been sick. Once was at a big Kirtan festival in Joshua Tree. And he was actually, we weren't even sure if he was going to perform that night because he had been in the ER with such a high fever that they weren't even sure he would be released in time to come and lead the Kirtan. And he did. And he hobbled out on stage that night. And he started the first few lines, and honestly, he sounded terrible. But within a few minutes, he was totally absorbed in his practice. And he just says everything else melts away. It's just him and Maharaji for those. And then he'll look up and 2 hours has gone past. That's one example. And the other was more recent. I mean, KD had just been teaching here in Baja, California, Sur. And he said he was leading a retreat. And he said he felt like he got COVID when he traveled. But this was Thursday and he had left like Monday. So if he had COVID, he still had COVID in his system and he was still showing up for Thursday practice because he knows we're all sitting there desperately waiting for this Charnamrit that we receive when we get to chant with him from Maharaji. So that's commitment to practice, right? That's really commitment. The fact that Nina shows up every day or that Greg's showing up every day to make sure those Zoom rooms are open. That's commitment. I'm sure, I've even seen you. And I've had bad days. I've had a couple of bad days this week where I was like, I'm coming anyway. I don't feel like being here. I don't even feel blissful. The practice doesn't make me feel blissful, but you're still there doing your practice. Yeah. I like on one of Jyotel's albums, he has a whole thing that talks about bhakti yoga. I'll try and drop the link in here as well for people. I'm not going to look for it while we're on the call, but I think is it The Art of Ecstatic Kirtan or something is the name of the album. And the first 20 minutes, he talks about, he's like, we bring our tears to God. We cry with God. We sing our delight with God. We bring all of that can be an offering. Even your anger, like all of it, swaha, I offer. So it's obviously, for me, it is easier to offer my anger like to Kali, or when I'm doing advocacy, I can put a lot of anger that way. I don't know how that works in Hanuman, but I can imagine he transforms it all too. So with Bhakti Yoga, it's about a personal relationship with the deity, and we can offer those emotions for the deity to eat, literally, to eat that karma for us. But be careful, because if you offer it, they might require it a little more often. Yeah. So anyway, I'll pause there because I'm going into some advanced teaching things that I don't want to go there today. Anyway, but offer the tears, offer the practice, show up and sit, whether you're sitting on a mat or sitting in front of your altar or whatever. Show up to do your practice, whether you feel like it or not. It's easy to practice when it feels blissful. Much harder to sit down and do your daily practice, even if you don't feel like it. And I see KD be an amazing example of that. Okay, I want to check if there are any more final questions before we wrap up for this evening. While you're thinking about that, I'll mention that we've got coming up on Tuesday, I did them kind of back to back. Monday night is actually Shivaratri, the great night of Shiva, but I'm going to do it on Tuesday night. Work better for my schedule, but we'll be chanting up a storm, focusing on Shiva mantras, and I'll probably be teaching the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. There won't be a quiz on how to pronounce that, but the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. The Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshya Mamrita. What? Mukshya. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshya Mamrita. There we go. They call it the death-defying mantra. It helps purify karmas, and people chant it when people drop their bodies, or when they're trying to prevent people from dropping their bodies and dying, as we would say in the West. So it's a very, very potent mantra. And I'll be going into that in more detail, and I'll also offer some much more simple mantras to Shiva. So we'll be focusing on that. It's a very, very potent night. And Shiva is the ultimate yogi. He meditated for thousands of years on standing on one leg, and he was, we think of yogis as being all sattvic, but he hung out in the mountains and went off to war, and he was pretty hardcore. Parvati's family were not too happy when she decided to marry him. So so yeah, we'll be connecting with Shiva energy, and I've been diving into Shiva practice pretty potently for the last year, so it'd be lovely to share that with all of you. And Ankh, if you wanted to come and check out what some of what Naomi and I've been talking about, like about chanting the mantras, you could come. And Shiva is connected to the sacred or divine masculine, so yeah, could be a good place to start.
Well, I'm happy I showed up at this one because it helped answer some questions that have been kind of bugging me for years.
Okay. Great. Well, anything else, Naomi, before we wrap? I love it that you came so prepared with questions. Thank you. That totally, I feel especially loved when people prepare stuff ahead of time. I don't obviously require it for this, but that really floated my boat. So thank you for keeping notes along the way. that really worked for me. And so lovely to meet you a little more, Unc. I hope you continue on as part of our community. I've got some really fun stuff coming up. I've got a friend of mine who's a trauma therapist, and she's going to come and talk to us about the traumatic impact. Well, sorry, I'm weird. I like geeking out on trauma theory, so I think this is fun. But we're going to talk about the traumatic impact of the pandemic and how it's impacted people.
Okay.
She's a trauma therapist in Oakland. She also does Akashic record readings, and it might be a few months from now, but she's going to come in and talk to us. Midori is going to come in and talk to us. All of us know about Midori and her rope stuff, but she's a much more multidimensional being than just that.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to focus on her art. A lot of people don't know Midori is both a performance artist and creates pieces that are displayed. She's got a display up in New York right now.
Yeah.
She's going to come and talk to us at the beginning of April. And yes, I'm going to pick your brains for a moment. And Naomi, I might kind of know the answer to this question from you, but I am considering running a retreat in person. Oh my goodness, it might just happen. I know there's been a strong call from a lot of my students for that to happen. I'm looking at doing it the week before Memorial Day weekend, so we can use Memorial Day weekend as part of the training, but here in Mexico in the Bay of Dreams. And it would be quite an intimate retreat, minimum 8 people. I could add on if there's enough interest, but I'm just, I'm curious to hear how a retreat in Mexico lands. I know, Naomi, you don't normally travel, but I'm just curious how that lands.